Today's interview is conducted online, and our guest resides in California, USA. Hello, Susanna.
Hello.
I'm glad we have this opportunity to chat. So, let's begin. First, let's talk about your upbringing.
My upbringing.
Where were you born? Tell us about your early years. What kind of environment did you grow up in?
I am from Guangdong. I am Cantonese. I grew up in a rural area. How should I put it? I would say I was an atheist. Because, in the Chinese environment, well, you also know, right? There was no religiosity in that place. That includes my father, who was a cultured person. He knew some astronomy and geography. Since we were young, he would tell us some stories about deities. But he was also an atheist. It's strange. Later, I moved to a town. I started doing some small business. I did it for 10 years.
How many siblings do you have in your family? How many children?
4 of us, an older brother and sister, and a younger sister.
So, during your childhood, were you the kind of child who enjoyed playing freely? Or were you more inclined towards learning and reading?
As a child, I enjoyed singing and dancing. But I didn't have the environment for that. Back then, I used to watch ballet on TV. I'd even put on shows for my older sisters. They'd say, "Wow, you really look like a dancer." When I was young, my family didn't have much money, and there were tons of chores to do. So I had to pitch in with the chores from a young age. And that didn't leave me with much time to learn those things. My father, on the other hand, had a preference for boys over girls. He didn't prioritize the education of us girls. For example, during our childhood, my father never cared about our studies. Many people had a happy and relaxed childhood, but I didn't. My childhood was filled with a lot of pressure because I remember when I was in 3rd grade, my father fell ill. There was one day that left a deep impression on me. It was a Wednesday. When I was about to go to school, I heard my mom crying. My mom has always loved us dearly. When I heard my mom crying, I felt very sad. I didn't go to school instead. I stayed home, listening to my mom cry, wondering what had happened. At that time, my mom had already realized that my father's illness might be serious. The chances of a cure were probably slim. I could sense that there was a great burden and heaviness in our family. It was from that time that I felt like I had begun to mature. I had to share all the responsibilities in our family and take on the worries of my parents. I was only around 9 or 10 years old at that time. I already understood that I had to worry about finances and food for my parents. But later, my father came over, because my father himself is a doctor, a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner. He slowly took care of his own illness through treatment. He recovered and eventually became healthy.
Your father was a cultured person. At that time, there weren't many people like that in the countryside. So, your family in your village had a high status and it was a respected family, right?
Yes, that's right, because my father had a kind heart, and whenever someone had a problem, they would definitely seek his help. In our village, my father was responsible for all the important matters. They would ask my father to write a ceremonial text for them. My father's calligraphy was excellent. When he finished the household chores, my father would sit at the doorstep with a chair, enjoying the cool breeze outside. Then, our neighbors nearby would often gather in front of our house. That's when my father would start telling stories. It was like singing. He often sang about theories of traditional Chinese medicine. He would sing them like songs. He would compose poems. These things were what he always did while I was growing up. My father, he often talked about the 5 elements. I didn't understand, and I wasn't interested. But as I got older, I understood its essence. Thanks to my father for introducing me to the 5 elements: metal, wood, water, fire, earth. They added another layer to my cultivation. Turns out, what he was saying was correct. Actually, we rejected it because we didn't understand.
It's interesting.
Quite interesting.
I just heard you say that. You left home early to do business, right? How old were you back then? What kind of business did you do?
Before doing business, I had already worked as a laborer for several years.
You started working at a young age.
Yes, because our family was poor. 'Cause when my father offered medical treatment, never charged others much money. He accepted whatever people were willing to give. We used to hear that so-and-so treats people's illnesses. Got a lot of money. My father will say, doctors have a compassionate heart. It's enough to cure people. It's almost entirely supported by my mother alone. She has been sustaining this family. That was when all 4 of us sisters were studying. So I decided to go out and work. My father hoped that we wouldn't have to work as laborers in the future. He wanted us to do some business.
I think his thinking was ahead of its time.
Yes, he also encouraged us to sell things at gatherings. He said it didn't matter if we made a loss. He wanted us to learn something, he said. It would be best if we had some survival skills in the future. This might have also been an opportunity for my own growth, as I later began running a small business. I sold children's clothing. It wasn't easy to sell either. Later on, I started selling cosmetics on my own. Men's and women's underwear, socks, and gifts. The profit margin was quite high. Afterward, I did it for 10 years. I used the money I earned back then for investments to support my expenses when I moved out to the United States.
I want to ask about what you said earlier. You're an atheist, right? You don't believe in God? How did that change later?
I was working in Huangpu, Guangzhou at that time. After work, we would go swimming. To go swimming, you need to have a clean bill of health. That clean bill of health, they said I have hepatitis after the medical test. Didn't feel like anything was wrong with me. I didn't feel uncomfortable anywhere. They said I had hepatitis. I got scared. My father said it wasn't a big deal. He didn't recommend that I go see a doctor, but my brother said, you should still go see other doctors first. I was only 20 years old at that time. I don't remember who told me that. Someone else could quickly treat hepatitis. Only take a few prescriptions to fix it. I went and took his medicine, but it wasn't just a few prescriptions. He said I had to slowly cleanse the blood and then regenerate blood cells. I took a lot of his medicine and felt my body gradually became weaker and weaker, losing my strength. Wait a sec, let me grab a drink and put on a tank top. Because I was ill. Being ill was very despairing at that time. I couldn't work, suffered from insomnia, headaches, and rheumatism, liver disease, you name it, a whole bunch of them. At that time, I was still young, my life is just beginning, a whole bunch of illnesses, it was really miserable. Later, a friend suggested that I practice Falun Gong. At first, I didn't believe it. Then they told me Guang Gumin had liver cancer. After practicing Falun Gong, he improved a lot. I've heard of this person. His songs are very popular in mainland China. I've heard his songs. His story really touched me. Because his condition was worse than mine, I only had a bit of liver disease, a bit of pain. Not to the extent of liver cirrhosis. It's just that work standing for a long time, your physical strength declines. For me, it's an opportunity. If others have recovered, should I give it a try? It doesn't cost anything. They teach you why not. So when I started practicing, I had a particularly deep impression of learning the first set of exercises. Because at that time, my complexion wasn't good. I rarely sweat. I'm someone who needs to cover with a blanket even in summer. Then, the first time I learned the first set of exercises, I felt a full body heat, a feeling I hadn't experienced in a long time. My face turned red. Wow. My face looked so beautiful. In that instant, I thought, this practice is great. I want to continue. One day, I felt extremely weak. I couldn't even lift a kettle of water. Back then, I had just started practicing meditation, and my understanding of it was quite limited. I felt like I couldn't go on. If that's the case, then I won't be able to go to work. My whole body felt weak, powerless. In my mind, I kept reciting, Falun Dafa is good. After a while, I got busy. That feeling of weakness disappeared in an instant. I felt light and buoyant. Can atheism explain this? If there is no divine, can there be such miracles? Gradually, I changed my atheistic beliefs. Now I tell my relatives, like my younger sister, neither she or my brother-in-law believe it. Just 9 words, can you made it?
When you were reciting these 9 words at that time, deep inside you believe it. So, that means you already believed in a divine being.
There was no choice back then, because people said, just recite these 9 words and it will work. So, do you want to give it a try, or just go back home? Without strength can't do the job. No choice but give it shot. Hey, it's worked. So, am I still an atheist? I think I need to change my perspective. There really is a divine being in this world. During the part where they said I should go practice Falun Gong, in the beginning, I just said okay to appease them. I said, okay, I'll go practice another day. Actually, I was just pacifying them. But after hanging up the phone, I thought, oh, tomorrow morning if I wake up at 6 a.m., then I'll go. I knew I couldn't wake up at 6 a.m. But the next day when I woke up and opened my eyes, the clock showed exactly 6 a.m. It was strange. I opened my eyes.
And then you went?
I didn't go the first time. Then they saw that I hadn't come out for so long and called me again to go. They said, oh, you should come out to practice. Don't give up such a great practice. Don't miss out. They kept saying how great it was. I said I would go, but deep down, I knew I wouldn't go. I didn't have the time. After hanging up the phone, I thought, if I wake up at 6 a.m. tomorrow, then I'll go. I said that to myself unintentionally. Guess what? I woke up at exactly a.m. the next morning. And it's been like that for the following days.
So, did you go later?
Oh, I didn't go the second time either. Then they called again the third time and asked me to go. I was just appeasing them. I said to myself, oh, if I wake up at 6 a.m. tomorrow, then I'll go. In fact, I didn't take those thoughts seriously the first 2 times. I didn't think much about what I had said. But the third time, when I woke up the next day at 6 a.m., I suddenly realized that this wasn't a coincidence. I thought, if there really are gods and Buddhas in this world, then am I deceiving them? If I promise something to someone, I should follow through.
But the first 2 times, in their eyes, did it seem like you wasn't keeping your word?
Yes, at that time, as an ordinary person, I was just appeasing them. But it's really been waking up at a.m. several times in a row. I realized I couldn't just brush it off. I opened my eyes, and it was exactly 6 a.m. That was definite someone was governing this. The third time, I couldn't avoid it. I had to go. If I didn't go, I would be deceiving the gods. That would be a grave sin, that's what I thought. I immediately got up and went that day. That's when I truly started practicing.
That's when you truly started believing in gods.
From that time, well, not many yet. At that time, this shell of disbelieving gods, there were too many of them, too heavy, too thick, and it had to be slowly broken.
So, what was the final event that truly transformed your previous worldview?
I couldn't understand June Falun when I first started reading it. When I reached the 6th lecture, in it said, wasn't the original wording though. Some people mentioned that they sat down and suddenly disappeared. After a while, they reappeared when I read that sentence. I thought, isn't this about cultivating immortality? My father told me stories about immortals as I was child. He told a lot of things. Every night, people would come to listen to him. I have memories of it from my childhood. He would often tell those immortal stories. So at that moment, I was puzzled. Oh, isn't this about cultivating immortality? Learning Fa is so important.
Learning Fa. Is it about studying from books? Is that what it means?
Yes, right.
In the beginning, for a long time, you had some difficulty understanding this book, but gradually, you said you started to understand what it was talking about.
Yeah, before, I couldn't understand. And the other practitioners would say, you can take a look at Master's other teachings. In the Q&A section among them, there could be the questions you want to ask. After that, I got read the other books. Yeah, really, I got a lot of improving. Slowly and surely, I started to understand.
Do you also often discuss among fellow practitioners about some principles that you don't understand? Do you provide each other with help?
Ah, yes. For example, in June Falun, it says not to fight back or argue back. When encountering problems, we need to look inward. I didn't know what it meant. But sometimes when I hear fellow practitioners encountering issues, they say, let me search within myself. Countering such a thing, there must be something wrong with me. At the beginning, I didn't think I'm wrong. But in the practice, it requires you to look inward for anything that happens. So I started thinking, I don't seem to have done anything wrong. My intentions were all correct. I'm not good at cultivating. There are many exchanges among fellow practitioners. From them, I can see that there is a significant gap between us. They have reached that level. You will see your own gaps or shortcomings.
Do conflicts or contradictions arise among you? How do you deal with these conflicts? Or when others don't understand you?
There will definitely be conflicts, and they do happen. But after you argue with someone, you will regret it. You will feel that you haven't achieved the virtue of truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. At the very least, you haven't acted with compassion. When I argue with someone, sometimes my tone is very heavy. My manner is harsh. That makes the other person feel uncomfortable, which is not compassionate. Hurting others is not compassionate. And when you get into an argument with someone, you are not forbearing. But every time this happens, I feel regretful inside. I think, oh, all the cultivation I have done today has been in vain.
Sometimes you simply have different opinions from others. That doesn't mean you should not express your own opinions, right?
Right, yeah. Afterward, you will see. Oh, I can see my own competitive mentality. I'm so stubborn. Especially when I believe I have valid reasons. I must clarify where my reasons come from.
Is it not right?
It's a competitive mentality because you insist on being right for excellence. I didn't realize it before. I thought I was right, but it's not right. I also saw many of my own flaws. Without cultivation, I won't understand this. What does cultivation mean? It turns out it means removing one's own negative aspects. That's the state.
What do you say? A person in the world can live quite comfortably without cultivation. There are many people like that. They live just fine without cultivation. Is it necessary for everyone to cultivate?
Well, how should I put it? Yes, because when you don't know about something better, you will think you are fine as you are. You might think, I have no worries, I have money, right? I am better off than many other persons in life. Maybe it's true, but when you cultivate, and when you realize there is something better, you will feel that things are not like that. Because when your worldview is limited to this point, you cannot see higher possibilities. You don't know about better things. It's like, if I hadn't cultivated, I would still be better off than many people. Honestly, although some things didn't go smoothly for me, It doesn't mean that others had it easier, right? Everyone has their own difficulties, don't they? But why did I feel so miserable back then? After cultivation, my perspective on life changed. Why did I feel so happy? It turns out that letting go of these negative things brings happiness. You feel a sense of relief in your heart. You feel a kind of joy, a lightness. If you don't cultivate, you won't experience this beauty. It's hard to put into words. Perhaps one needs to personally read the June Phelan to experience such a feeling. If I hadn't read June Phelan, I wouldn't have known that. When I read June Phelan, my heart would become so calm. I used to speak in a high-pitched and forceful tone. A few words from me would make me burst out.
What do you mean by burst out?
For example, when I was in the right, I would be particularly assertive and fierce. I would display an arrogant and domineering attitude. People would feel very uncomfortable, uneasy. Your dominance gives others a sense of fear. People feel afraid of you because of your dominance. They fear you to some extent. When I learned June Phelan, gradually, I became aware that these things were not good. I needed to eliminate these things. You should strive to meet the requirements of truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance.
I benefited a lot from your words today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susanna. Thank you for spending so much time talking to me. I got a lot.
I'm also very grateful to you. Talking about my past. Honestly, I feel very grateful. I'm very grateful for obtaining DAFA. To those who haven't read June Phelan yet, go and take a look. It will truly give you a different world. These are the heartfelt words from within me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.